This week on Rockstar Superhero. When one is dealing with the often misunderstood after effects of depression, it's really easy to fall into a hole so deep it's very hard to escape. Some never do, while some not only survive, but write songs around the experience as a way towards catharsis. This also helps those who might hear the story and recognize themselves in the middle of the same tragedies. Tyler Tate, the dynamic frontman for the powerful Holofront, was my guest on our show today, and I loved every minute of our time together because he never shied away from the very issues that give him power. Tyler has made it, and he admits he's a work in progress, but he's doing it in front of us right now, and that is some seriously legendary behavior. So, let's not give anything away. You need to listen to Tyler's story today because you will be all the better for it. This is Tyler Tate of Michigan's Holofront, and this is Rockstar Superhero. Tyler Tate from Holofront, man. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Super excited.
Yeah, well, I'm the one I think who's super excited. You're one of the real deals, you know what I mean? And I say every show that I only host bands I love, but you guys are monstrously cool. And clearly from everything I've read about you, you're pretty lovable as well.
Well, thanks, man. I'm glad that's been said out in the world. There might be some people that are close to me like, oh, that guy's grumpy.
Yeah.
I try to be as open and nice as possible.
Yeah, I think we live in a world nowadays, and I mean, I'm not going to do the whole Elvis get off my lawn thing, but you know, man, we live in a world where everybody's arguing all the time. They're arguing in person, they're arguing online, they're talking behind our backs, and it's really hard to be positive. But I think if you put a good face on, you put a happy face on, people can't help but be inspired by that, you know?
Yeah, I think, 20, 30 years ago, people were still talking crap behind people's back, but at least nobody knew about it, you know?
Yeah.
People are they're more brazen nowadays. You know, they'll get on the internet and they'll just type whatever comes out of their head. And,
sure.
I've been there. I've said things on the internet. I'm like, wow, I probably should have chilled out a little bit. I think we let people that we've never met, will never meet, never see in person control our emotions. And I think that I'm definitely a casualty of that.
Wow. Okay. So that's a killer way to start this, man. Thank you so much. You know, it's so true. There's something about the artist psyche, the creative psyche, that it's a combination of things, right? So we're born this way, and the people that aren't born this way don't understand it. So that's part one. Part two is because we're born this way, we're doing everything we can to get our perspective out there because we're really seeking love and inspiration and to sort of fill those giant holes in our hearts, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it makes sense why we would pile on, because I think we're the ones that get addicted easily to social media just because of the proximity to potential relationship. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, a part of it's seeking validation, I think, as an artist, especially, you're very vulnerable and you're putting your most vulnerable parts out into the world for people to see. And, when somebody, shits all over it, it kind of it does, even though you've never met that person and probably never will, because, that's just how the world is. 7 billion people in the world, you still take that to heart. And I've definitely, have felt that a few times, especially with Holofront. I'm very protective of Holofront. So when people say bad things about the band, or, not even really bad things, just I don't like it, normally that's fine, but still it's just dang, I wish I could have got that person. I wish I could have made that person like us. But you got to really think about it deep down inside that's not, it's not possible to have everybody like you.
Yeah.
And it's something that it's something you learn as an artist to kind of, you toughen the skin a little bit. But there's still chinks in your dragon scales and someone's gonna poke you at some point, you know.
Yeah, yeah, man, that's so true. The need to be loved is such a crazy thing. I mean, we've all heard it a million times, but yeah, I mean, I think the artist will do almost anything for love. I mean, Meatloaf made it famous, right? And it's so true. We'll go to the ends of the earth to win somebody over, but I'm just so glad there's a guy like you that exists that is putting out killer material. And in the same token, he's making himself very transparent and available. And to be very frank, admitting that sometimes you're a part of the problem. And that's a tough place to be. But guys like you are badass, man. So thanks for being here. And thanks for telling the truth today. I'm really excited to share this hour with you.
Yeah, man. Let's dive into it. What do you got for me?
Well, I got to ask a basic question to start, and then we'll get into some of the more complex stuff. But cool. You and I were talking a little bit before we started rolling, and you're in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's colder and shit today.
It is.
And I'm curious, different cultures, different locales, different families, right? There's all these variables that make us who we are. And I've actually never been to Michigan in my life. I really don't know anything about it outside of what I've read on the newspaper or watched on TV or some friends that live there. And, I'm kind of curious, what is the local culture like, and how did your early years forge you into the man I'm talking to right now? Because you're now the one that's standing on the front of a stage, and that's got to be a kind of a crazy place for a guy like you.
Yeah, I think every performance I still kind of like have the moment where I'm like the anxiety takes over, and it's like, I don't think that'll ever go away. I think that's something I'll always have. Probably, I feel like if that ever goes away, then I've kind of been like, oh well, maybe I'm so acclimated to it that it's the excitement's not there. I think it's more the anxiety for excitement and ready to play. Yeah. Grand Rapids is pretty bland. I mean, overall, like it's not like I was just in Washington for my first time, on this last tour, and it's like mountains everywhere, and it's like crazy views, and the city's like, even though Seattle, I feel like Seattle versus Grand Rapids is a lot smaller and a lot less people, and it's a lot cleaner, it's a lot more chill, and there are some aspects of the city, which any big city you're going to have crime, and you're going to have the element of danger, in some spaces, depending on where you are. But Grand Rapids is just pretty chill. It's just, we have lots of cultures here, and we have a lot. It's a melting pot for sure. Pretty much like any big city. Yeah. The music scene is, it's up and down. I think, when Howlfront started, there was probably like 15 local bands that were playing at all times, and probably oversaturating themselves, which is like the normal thing when you start. But now it's like, maybe it's just because I'm not so in tune with the local scene, but I feel like there's just less bands and less local music happening. But we have like, an arena, and we have like all these, like Megadeth just played here like a couple days ago. So, we have that, like, we have that big element where we have the big arena, and we have the smaller clubs, and then we have the really small bars that people play. And
right.
It's a chill city. And I've lived here on and off for the last 30 years.
Okay. And you're from there, right?
I'm technically from a town called Ionia, Michigan, which is like 40 minutes away. But my parents moved me to Grand Rapids when I was a kid, and then I moved back to Ionia in high school. Then when I graduated, I moved back to Grand Rapids, and then I got divorced in 2016, and I got divorced, and so I moved back to Ionia, and now I moved back to Grand Rapids. So it's kind of like those in between those two places that I kind of in between those two locales that I kind of call home.
Gotcha. So I have to ask this question then, because for the people that are watching this on video, it's very easy to see, but you're a very young looking guy. I mean, if I may ask, how old are you? Because I have no idea.
I'm 31 years old. I was born in 1990.
Okay. So I have a son your age. so thank you for making me feel old. But I am. I mean, it's fine, dude. I mean, look, man, I'm still 14 in my brain and 51 everywhere else. But yeah, I mean, life is just tough, man. There's just no getting around it. There's no easy path for anyone. I think that going back to the, the whole culture thing or talking about like online and social media, it's all we ever see is everybody's, best face, right? So everybody, it's almost like everybody's supermodeling, right? They're turning to the right or they're turning to the left and they're saying, which is my best side? And that's the one I want to present to the world. And, it's hard, of course, for a city, and I don't want to stay on the Grand Rapids thing, but, like I was thinking about Seattle and you're talking about how beautiful it is. And yes, the surroundings are beautiful, but just like social media, the core is pretty freaking ugly. And right. I mean, and here we have a massive, like maybe the worst in the country, homeless problem. Lots of, big drug problem, which is sort of, famous for this area, the whole heroin thing. I don't know why it's become such a burden here, but it's true. And because
the world's hard, man, people need, and I've been down the drug path. I never did heroin or anything like that, but I think it's something that it's easier to cope with your misgivings, and I think it's easy. You try it because either you want to have fun or you want to squelch some pain, but in the end you become absolutely dependent on it, which kind of ruins your life. I have family. I have an uncle that was homeless for alcohol problems, and he most likely is dead. We haven't heard from him in 10 years.
Oh, sorry.
He's, and it's a sad thing. And when I was in Seattle, it's like, we called it tent city, tents everywhere. And, and as much as it's easy to make like a passed away joke like that, there's tents everywhere, tents on the sidewalks and tents under the bridges and tents in random weird, like wood spots. Like you drive down the highway and you see, like, it's sad, man. It's more sad than anything. It's because we live in a country, and everything's prices are raising,
Sure.
prices are raising, and people are caught in that web that and it's like a deep dark hole that you fall, in depression and mental illness, and there's not really any good programs that that really are widely accessible.
Yeah. Well, the problem with human nature, and I saw this back in the 80s during the AIDS crisis, is that the desire to help others is always overwhelmed by the desire to turn away, because it's right. It's so much easier. And I remember somebody saying to me, and at the time, I was very young, and I remember even laughing at this. It was like, well, all the people that have AIDS, just put them on Madagascar and they'll all die and we won't have an AIDS problem anymore. I remember this guy telling me that, and I was like, well, that's pretty hardcore, but that's the thinking, right? They're just hoping all these homeless people overdose. Nobody's going to say it out loud, but
right.
they don't know how to deal with it. It's very expensive to deal with it. And again, because we live in a world where everybody's got an opinion, and by God, if you don't follow my way, I'm going to ghost you. I'm going to cut you down. I'm going to cancel you, whatever it is. There's just no way to win anymore. And, I can't remember the exact quote, but I was reading this yesterday where Mark Twain had said, it's easier to convince somebody of a lie. It's easier to convince somebody of a lie than it is to convince them that they weren't lied to, if that makes sense.
Right.
And it's just so hard for people to overcome what they see in front of you. And, one of the things I wanted to actually talk to you today about, because of your past and what you've shared online, is the idea of obstacles, that people always quit. They quit whatever they're doing when presented with obstacles. And there's this great book by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way. And I highly suggest anyone listening reads this, because it's one of those things where you do realize that, okay, everybody I know who's successful at anything in life, right? Whether it's, oh, wow, I think they have more money than me, or they have more celebrity, whatever it is you're seeking, that every one of those people didn't quit when presented with an obstacle. And for you as an artist, I'm curious, were you so wildly in love with music that you didn't mind that there were obstacles, that there were no shortcuts?
I think that my relationship with music has definitely been like a bad marriage, but it's like it's been like a marriage that has its ups and downs.
Charged.
And I, as a divorced man, I don't know how good this analogy works for me, but I'm like, it started out very young for me, and it was a dream. I was using the hairbrush as a microphone, jumping on my bed and singing to whatever rock songs were popular on the radio at the time. I started in the radio rock kind of, with my dad, listening to that kind of stuff. And he was in a band. And, so I was just like, I want to be in a band just like my dad, and I was always seeking my dad's affection and approval. And, I don't think I needed to as hard as I did. I think my dad was just a tough cookie to crack, So, but like music, so in high school, I was super about, like, once I got to like in an actual band, like with guitars and bass and drums, not just in my bedroom with a friend, like, we're going to start a band, and like none of us have instruments or any kind of,
Motley Crue.
Yeah. So I, had that initial like high, I think, from playing shows and wanting to chase that dream, because there were other bands in my area that were kind of, a little bit older, that were kind of chasing and following that dream. And it was kind of like a push. Mm-hmm. But then as I got older, it got harder, like I got married, I had a kid, and then I had a second kid, and,
wow.
And with the hardships of trying to be in a band at 22, 23, like it really weighed on me, man. I was in 11 failed projects from 2004 until 2015.
Wow.
And
you started young.
18 years almost now.
Wow.
And I really was like over it. Music was kind of dead to me as like a career path, because I feel like I listened to less music as well, just because I was jaded, and I look back now and I'm like, dude, you were still so young, but I did let that obstacle kind of make me quit. I did formally at one point say, I'm done with music. I have a wife and I have 2 kids, and I'm going to focus all my effort into that, instead of, being in a band, you have a lot of sacrifices, even if it's a small local band, you sacrifice a lot of time, mm-hmm. because that's what you absolutely need to get to anywhere, is sacrificing your time and putting it into this entity, this band, or this career path. And it got old for me. I was sick of it. And it wasn't until I got separated that I was kind of like, I needed music. I needed it back in my life. And I was very, very stubborn. It took about, in retrospect, about 8 months after my divorce that somebody talked me into jamming. But even then, when Hollow Front started and we had music and stuff, I was like, there's no touring for me. There's no signing a label, or at least like a major label that expects you to tour. I got 2 kids. I'm a single dad. Right. How am I going to do this? And it was, Hollow Front kind of took off on its own so much that I was forced, and not forced, but like it kind of reopened my eyes. So it was like, the marriage, it's like a marriage. You start off great, the honeymoon phase, and then you get into those parts where it's like, okay, we're happy with each other, but there's some things, that are, it's rocky, it's not perfect. Mm-hmm. And then you somehow, there's that relationship where you find that passion, that flame again, and it kind of, you know, and you have another happy 30, 40 years with your wife or whatever, you know. Not the case for most people in the world, but that's my analogy for it right now.
Sure.
And I, you know, when Hollow Front started to see a modicum of success, I was like, my eyes were just, you know,
right.
And there was even a point before we released our EP Still Life where I was thinking of quitting Hollow Front. You know, Hollow Front really wasn't doing anything until Still Life EP came out. Like, we had very little local success and still playing shows for 5 people, you know, and it's like, you know, there were things in my life that Hollow Front was holding me back from, which is, it's still there. These things are still exist, you know, spending most of my time with my kids is, you know, it's a sacrifice that I make to do Hollow Front. But now at this point, I've gotten to the point where I can balance, you know, as best I can. But
Right.
like any kind of personal romantic relationship is affected by Hollow Front, because it's just something that requires so much of my energy that I've just dumped myself into it, because now it's not just my dream I'm holding in my hands. It's, you know, Dakota's and Brandon's and Lee's, and it's just everyone in the band that, you know, I can't quit now, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because if I quit, you know, I feel like I'd be letting down so many people, not just myself.
Right. And that sacrifice wouldn't have been worth it. None of it. You would have failed everyone and yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy the kind of pressure we put on ourselves. I mean, and look, everybody's doing it. It's not just a musical thing, but it's also sad to me that people outside of the creative process, right? I mean, what I call normal people, because artists, we're not normal. There's just nothing normal about us.
Mm-hmm.
Is they look at us and they say, well, you're playing. They use the word play, and play is fair. That is the right word. But the problem is there's also a have to in there, right? There's a drive and an obsession and a compulsion to do this thing because it's born into your spirit. And I can hear like the internet right now groaning and like rolling their eyes, but it's true. We are so unintentionally self-involved and self-absorbed and addicted to what music provides for us, because again, it's a savior for us, right? It fills the God-sized hole.
Yeah, I mean, without Hollow Front, without the beginning of this band, I would, you know, I was in a super dark place after my divorce. Yeah, I was drinking from the moment I got home to the moment I went to sleep, and you know, I was letting it affect not just, you know, I was letting it affect everything. I wasn't taking my kids. I wasn't. I was having a pity party for sure, you know, and I was deep in a hole, and the band came at a time when I needed it the most. And I was able to write lyrics that, you know, I never go into a song being like, I'm writing this for somebody else. I'm literally writing my thoughts and my feelings. And it's, you know, like you said, it's very self-absorbed, but I feel like I need it, you know, and it's also it's a way to say things that I wouldn't say, you know. The things I said on Homewrecker, I didn't really say those to my ex-wife's face, you know. It's just
right.
Just things that I was like, thoughts in my head that I needed to get out, but I didn't have a therapist, and Hollow Front was my therapist.
Sure.
And it did fill that hole that I was A, missing from my marriage, and B, missing from just being in a band altogether, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what's awesome about being an artist, though, is the catharsis of creation, you know? And I mean, I myself am divorced. I mean, I'm remarried. I've been remarried for a very long time now, but I understand to a point, you know, your own experience and having children myself. I get that trade and that sacrifice. And then there's the cultural aspects of it, right? The people around you who say, how dare you trade time away from your kids to pursue some failed dream, right?
Yeah.
The what are you trying to be, a rock star thing? And no, I'm just trying to be me, man.
That's actually a good segue into talking about our song, The Price of Dreaming. It's very like, I've been told, you know, to my face by family members, you know, why are you still doing this? You know, you're closing in on 30 and you're still playing shows in front of 10 people, and you know, you have kids and your kids come first, and it's like, you know, I to a certain degree, yes, my kids come first, but when I had kids, I didn't sign my life away, you know, and I had kids very young.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
20 years old, I've had my first son, and he's 11 now, you know, he's becoming a man, and it's scaring the shit out of me. But he, you know, the people that dedicate their entire lives to their kids, I respect that, you know, I respect it, because if that's what fulfills you, then by all means, like you've found the thing, you know. And for me, it was always music and being heard and being, you know, I'm not trying to be in a band to be popular. It has nothing to do with that. Yes, the popularity comes with success, and the success comes with stability, you know, and I still haven't reached that point yet.
But you need to be heard.
Yes. And just being heard and being seen on, you know, doing something that I'm not always confident in everything that I do, but when I'm on stage, that's my spot, you know, that's my zone. And I'm such a different person on stage and with my voice than I am in real life. You know, I'm still like loud and obnoxious sometimes, but like, I'm not like, you know, I'm very more introverted. I spend a lot of time alone. Whereas like when I'm out and doing hollow front, I'm in the world, you know, and I'm a part of the world, and I'm doing my best to kind of balance the two people, because, you know, there is kind of a stage presence and a normal people presence, and it's a thing. Yeah,
it is. It's actually great that you touched on that, because it's something I love to talk about, that the outsiders, and again, I don't want to refer to other people as less than. I want everybody to understand. I'm just talking about how do we define a creative, and to me, creatives are so clearly misunderstood most of the time, because the world sees us as, you know, somebody they see on television. You know, back in '95, Eddie Vedder once said to me, I asked him, you know, I was asking the question about, you know, what's the difference between a guy like you and a guy like me? You know, if you could break it down, broad stroke it, but break it down into this, you know, simplest form. And he said, Rob, man, the only difference between you and me is I do what I do on television. And people seem to think that separates him and elevates him, because it goes from one person seeing him on stage, like you mentioned, 10 people at your shows, to 1 million people seeing him on ABC. And nothing has changed with Ed. He's still just Ed. He's still just a surfer from San Diego. But you and I now see him as this weird, you know, God with a legend, right? With a message, and then, but the funny thing is then when he spreads his message, you argue that he shouldn't be using his platform to spread his message. It's the strangest thing.
The biggest example of this is Rage Against the Machine. People are like, Tom Morello, why are you bringing politics in your music? Have you ever listened to Rage Against the Machine?
Right.
It's been like that from the get-go, man. And that was like, they started in the 80s. I'm pretty sure they were like, you know, an 80s band to start, and they didn't get big until the 90s, but they were spreading that. He went to Harvard, I'm pretty sure, for political science or some kind of
so. Yeah.
Something like that. I remember watching an interview of him being like, or like somebody's like, how can you have this opinion? He's like, well, I have my degree from Harvard in that very
that kind of, there's a good starting point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and I think that it just proves that people are just, they have blinders on, you know.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of, you know, and I have this thought a lot where it's like you're driving around, and especially in a state I've never been, you know, like if I'm in Washington and there's like 1,000 cars around me, those are 1,000 different stories and 1,000 different circles of people that have certain opinions, and you are a product of your environment for the most part. You know, I know there's the people that, like, for me, like my family's super, super conservative and super, you know, sometimes extreme with it and that in their religion.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I'm kind of like the outskirts person of that. Like, I don't have any of those opinions, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't do religion. And so I think that it's crazy to think that there's just billions of people that have their own little circles and their own little, people that we'll never meet or know, but then you see them on the internet and they just spout whatever they want, but it's like,
you can't punch them that way.
Yeah. And it's weird how everything is broken up,
Yeah. I don't think we're all bullies,
No.
but boy, oh boy, do we love to talk shit. I really don't understand it. And even like quote unquote nice guys like you and I, and I'm not, again, I don't know you well enough to say like, I don't think you do that, but it's, we're all human. We all hear it every day. We always have somebody disclaim things. Dude, we're all human. We're going to go through trials and tribulations. We're going to have extreme joys and extreme failures. We're going to have highs and lows. And to me, the goal is, how do we take the peaks and the valleys and reduce their elevation, right? So we can live on a somewhat normalized playing field as a species, because let's get down to it, man. Life is all about people. And if we don't love on each other and we don't receive love from others, if we isolate, I mean, we're doomed. We're not made to be alone. And that's what I love about music, which, you mentioned the segue earlier to Price of Dreaming. I really want to talk about the album because I say this every time, but it's true. Like I said before, I love having artists on the show that I am inspired by. And I heard the record, of course, through the PR company, and it's a phenomenal piece of music as a whole, the whole journey of the album. It's bookended really well, by the way. Really, really dig that. But before we get to some of the singles, I'm curious, Are you the lyricist? Are you part of the songwriting process? Because I'm curious how much of the storytelling, the world building is on your shoulders, and what do you like about that process?
It used to be very all me. It was every word was me.
Okay.
But now that Dakota joined the band in 2018,
right. He's so good.
And he finally was debuted on our Loose Thread stuff, and even though he'd been in the band for almost 2 years at that point, he and so now it's kind of more of a shared venture. Dakota writes his own part, I write my own part, and then even you have other band members that have input, but for the most part, for this album, it was a little bit different of a process than we've ever done before. It was just we sat down and we kind of talked about the concepts that we wanted to talk about. And, we have, The Price of Dreaming, which is just, which is obviously the album title, and it encompasses kind of like the theme of the whole album is like, yeah, we pay a price for, we sacrifice things to do this because we love it. And it's ingrained in our souls, it's
right.
something that we can't discard from ourselves, unless, we want to be resentful 30 years from now and be like, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I continue that? And then we have songs like Self-Sabotage, which isn't a single, that's about body dysmorphia. And it's like, I've spent so much time looking in the mirror and hating myself for no reason other than societal, preferences, or like whatever
Sure.
whatever the TV has told us is beautiful, and it's like, and Lee, our guitar player, like I do it with my weight and he does it with his weight also, but it's more he can't gain weight, so he's like, he looks at himself and he thinks, like, I need to be heavier, and why can't I do that? And and it's something you look in the mirror and you just are disgusted by yourself. So that song's about that. And then you have Brandon, who our bass player, he lost somebody in to a murder, and it was,
good God. Oh,
so And that the song itself, obviously, the parts that I wrote from a place of I lost my grandpa, and it's a song about loss, but the main core theme of the song was, Brandon had a father figure that was murdered, and it was very traumatic for him. And even now he doesn't like the song just because it makes him sad, to listen to. And, but we've had input from every band member on lyrics. And,
that's great.
It was a joint venture on The Price of Dreaming, but pretty much every album before was kind of like a me, and then sometimes Dakota, but mostly me.
Gotcha. I think what draws me so much to the record is all the things you just said. There's a process of development through the record, meaning you're telling sort of a cohesive, this is life story. It's through obviously a group of, 5 people's lives. But what I'm trying to say is that it's really easy because you're reflecting humanity. We all go through struggles. We all deal with loss, sometimes violent loss. But we deal with sadness. We have hope. We're looking for the catharsis. We're looking for a fix. We rarely get a fix. And when we do get the fix, it's never enough, right? It's all the things, and that album hits all of those points. And again, not so much a question as kudos to you, because I think an album like this is actually relatively rare. As much as artists think they create this stuff, they don't necessarily put it together like you guys do or did. And so I can't wait for the world to hear this. I know it comes out next month, the whole album, I should say. But it's such a great top to bottom experience. And again, for a rhythm player, the material is spot on, man. It's so hard. But I never listen to lyrics. I say this on shows when this comes up, but I never listen to lyrics. And I gobbled up what I could in yours, and they spoke to me. So, again, for the listeners, I can't wait for you guys to check out this record. You're going to love it because you're going to find something in there that's going to draw you in, and you're going to see the talent and the vision behind this band and this awesome guy that's sitting in front of me. So good stuff, buddy.
Thanks, Rob. I'm glad you liked it. It's definitely something I always preface this with that I'm biased because I'm in the band and I wrote it. So obviously I love it.
Sure.
But I honestly believe it's our best work yet. It's something that is a step up from Loose Threads. It's not, and it might lose some of the heaviness, that was kind of our we want to write songs, not songs with just breakdowns and stuff.
Right. Look at us. We're another metalcore band.
Yeah. And it's like, and it's not really to be different. It's just because that's what we like, it's like, we like the Kill Switch, and we like those like metalcore bands that wrote songs. And I think that's just kind of what we've fallen, like, that's kind of like where we've, centered on to from like our previous stuff. It's like, we've always had choruses and stuff, but this album we were like, let's just write songs, let's not worry about if there's a breakdown, like, cool, it fits, it's not something that you just throw in to have a heavy part so that you have those internet people go, oh, that breakdown was sick, like it's not about that. It's about writing a cohesive and structured album, like like we would have heard 20 years ago. That's kind of just what the goal was. And I think we really nailed it because we were very hyper focused on that songwriting process.
Right. Yeah, I get tired of the internet comments like "hit so hard" or "what a banger." I'm like, dude, I mean, I get it. That's cool. I mean, I love it. I get joy out of it too. I love killer breakdowns. I love surprises. But yeah, I think part of it, of course, is maturity, right, Tyler? I mean, you're getting older. And again, because you're a father, you already have a lot of experience that your bandmates, I don't know all the guys, of course, but some of your bandmates don't have. They don't know what it's like to be you. And so you're going to see this album through a radically different lens. But I wanted to touch on something because I think it's it makes sense with this conversation is the first piece on the record, In the Spotlight. what I love about it is it sets you up for the rest of the record. And that is such a brave and smart production choice, because it's so hard when you're known to be a heavy slash metalcore band.
Mm-hmm.
You're known for the breakdowns, you're known for the screams, and then the singing. I mean, all the tropes. You guys totally flipped it on all of us, and you're like, nope, we're going to start out really, really light. I mean, we're going to, obviously the song changes a bit, but but again, it's because it matches up so well with the last song on the record that it's really about the journey and about the process. And I think that smart decision brings your listener in to actually consider the words you've written. What do you think about that?
In the moment of doing it, you're not really thinking about any of those things. I think, you're kind of just, you're focused on what your goal for the track is. And within the Spotlight, it honestly was an instrumental. Like it wasn't going to have any words.
Right.
But I was just like, I'm so sick of instrumentals on records that just, like sometimes they have their place, and we've had them, but for most part, they feel like they're shoehorned in, because of a budget or because of some kind of, like I know this album that has like 3 like instrumental like parts, and it's like, I wanted the album to have none of that, none of them blank spaces, like no like little interludes, and
all killer, no filler.
Yeah, so we decided to put lyrics to it, and it was like, and even when we finished it, that song was supposed to be the last song. It just somehow we came to the consensus that, hey, this would be a great opener, and we did go with the thought of, do we start with something that's a little bit more us, a little bit more heavy, a little bit more, do we kind of draw the people in before we drop that on them? But at the end of the day, we're just like, no, let's really give them something that we haven't done before, and put it like at the beginning, and be like, this is going to be like the rest of, it's going to set the pace for the rest of the album. And when we started to sit down and like put the songs together, it just made sense, the order that we put the songs in. They serve their place in every part. And like you said, with the last song, Running Away, like those 2 songs almost go, because like the first song is about being afraid of the spotlight and being afraid of, wondering if I'm even deserved to be here, or if it's just, it's so hard because it's a struggle, man. It's a lot of it's a mental marathon, being in especially a touring band, and we were going through the pandemic, and everything was just so bleak. And when I wrote those lyrics, and me and Dakota sat down, we're just like, we just want people to know that like it's hard, but we're doing it. And I think the last song, Running Away, kind of ties into with that, because it's a song about running away from your fears, and you have that. You have to have that bravery, even though you never have had that bravery, because you don't have a choice. You can't just run away from your problems all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that ties in with, are you going to run away from the spotlight? Because, it's hard. It's a difficult road. Are you going to run away from everything that you've dreamed of, just as you're, coming in within grasp of it, and
yeah.
So the dichotomy of the 2 songs, and how like the album starts, the album ends, I think that once we had the songs written, it was a clear choice of that was how we were going to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I don't want to keep hitting the mental health thing, but I love that it's a huge part of your story, and that you're so open to share on it. And, listening to Comatose, as an example, which is one of your singles on the record. I do want to quote you on this, because, you had spoken about it on some of the, the PR materials that come through. And I want to quote you, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
you said about comatose. I came up with this concept while being caught in the depths of depression during the heaviest part of the pandemic, when the entire music industry was shut down and there was no sign of a comeback in sight. Everything we had worked for was taken away in the blink of an eye, and we had no idea where we would get it back, and it was terrifying. And, so to me as an outsider, I understand that, because when you're caught in the middle of chaos and everybody is, reacting and nobody's reacting with any wisdom, of course, because none of us know what to do. And our livelihoods are taken away from us, or our dreams, in your case, are taken away, or both, right? Mm-hmm. That can be overwhelming to an impossible depth. And so how did you, I know we talked about this a bit earlier, but how did you get out from under this terror? Can you deep dive on this? Can you dive deep on this for me?
Man, I don't know if I've ever been completely out. I think I'm one of those people that are in and out, in and out, in and out. And
sure,
I'm easily depressed. I don't know what that's about. I've done the doctor thing. I don't like the drugs, so I've kind of just tried to deal with it on my own and as healthy as way as possible, whether that's speaking with somebody or talking with friends or that kind of thing. But yeah, during this time I was deep, because it was, that the quarantine, I don't know what your quarantine situation was like, but my kids stopped going to school. I stopped going to work. And I spent a lot of time alone. My kids, even when my kids were over, we were all in our own separate spaces, like they had their spot. And, cause we were very, and my ex-wife and I we were worried, at the beginning, because we didn't know how deep it was going to go, with
right.
kids. And so we were very, very cautious at the beginning. So it was like 4 months of just a lot of loneliness, and, and you try to fill your time with like video games and TV shows and all that kind of stuff. But, you're at the same time, tours are getting canceled, because you had tours that were booked months in advance, and now they're canceling. So you're dealing with that, and you're dealing with the fact that everything that I have been doing the last couple of years is kind of on hold. We're not practicing. We're not hanging out. We're not doing the things that made us who we were. And it was kind of like a cold turkey thing. It was very quick. It was like we were preparing to leave for a tour. We had just played a sold out show with We Came as Romans, and we were just about to do a tour, and like 2 weeks before we were leaving, it's like canceled. And then the next tour we had booked for the next month got canceled. And then the tour we had booked for the summer, which was like almost a full US, our very first full US, and it got canceled. We had a European tour that was in the fall, and then that got canceled. So it was just a lot of stuff at once that was dropped on top of someone who already deals with this kind of like struggle. Like I'm very easily triggered in the darkness, and when I wrote Comatose, it was I had a lot of these songs were written months and months in advance, but no lyrics.
Sure.
So I had the instrumental, and I would just drive for hours, because that was kind of like my catharsis after I get out of work, and it'd be nighttime, and I would just drive for maybe an hour in a circle going back to my house, and I would just listen to all these instrumentals and just thinking about all the shit that I was dealing with at the same time. It was just like, I wanted to convey that, in a way, especially with Comatose. I just felt like that song to me, just the instruments like kind of wrote the story for me, it was
right.
And things got better, once we started seeing that we got signed to UNFD, and they sent us to Pennsylvania to record, and that felt really good because it was finally like yes, we were wearing masks and we were, but we were doing the thing that we wanted,
Right.
like driving
Somebody's
in a
on your
vehicle.
team.
Yes. And it was like, finally, oh man, this feels good. And then we get a couple good offers like during that, like we got, we were doing we did the We Came as Romans tour last fall, and we knew that was coming in, and we were excited because it's like, okay, we're not going to get our expectations too high, but it's looking pretty good that this tour is going to go. So things were looking up, and I think that really, like, I started exercising after the studio. So like 2021, that's the thing I've always dealt with too, is like my weight, and I fluctuate, and I've never been able to get back to where I really want to be, like health wise. So I really like punched into gear at before that We Came as Romans tour, and lost like 30 pounds.
Good God. In a week?
No.
Okay.
I
was like, what did you do?
Before the We Came as Romans tour.
Gotcha. I misunderstood.
3 months. I had 3 months.
Okay, good.
And I was hiking and just eating well, and I think that's really what I know that story was long-winded because that's how I talk. But
it's great.
It's that really was what like kind of broke me out. And even up to the tour happening, like once I realized it was happening and we were actually going, and it was like, like it was just, yes, finally, like all this time I've been like, that's almost 2 years, a year and a half of not playing a show, not going to a concert, not doing, we did band stuff, we did music videos and stuff, but it was still everyone wore masks, and it just felt so not real,
Right.
It felt surreal. And then when we did the tour, it's like, finally, man, it's happening.
Yeah.
And then we have the tour offer we got the Fit for a King tour that we just did.
Right.
And that felt
I totally
good.
missed that. I'm so sorry. I would have loved to have seen you guys.
Well, we're coming back to Seattle with ABR in the summer.
Oh, great. Then my life is going to be complete. I can die after that. So we're good. It's so interesting that you've shared all this stuff. And one of the things, though, I'm curious, because you're such an intensely human feeling person, that when you finally get that experience, that catharsis, and you finally get, sort of your needs met, right? Like you talk about UNFD, and then you talk about the tours, and you're like, oh, thank God, finally, when it's over, when those tours are over, isn't it really easy to regress and maybe even fall back deeper into the hole, because all that joy and that value, that feeling of, oh, I'm needed and loved and appreciated, just stops. And so it's such a high. Are your lows even lower?
I'll talk a little bit about the Fit for a King tour, because I don't know how much but we got into a major accident near Portland, Oregon.
I had heard, but past that, I don't know what.
So, our merch guy got really hurt. We had to fly him home. He had to have surgery and stuff, and it was just a nightmare. And I think I fell into a deep depression on that tour, because as a father, like my first immediate thought was when we got hit, and and I don't want to say I'm happy that, I'm happy I didn't get injured, but I'm very terribly sad that Davey and our merch guy got injured, like I'm very empathetic. And I the worst part of it is that the van would have got totaled and nobody would have been hurt. God, that would have been the perfect scenario,
Yeah.
But I couldn't help but think if that vehicle had struck us, another another millisecond or something, my head was right there, and I don't, and with kids, my mortality was, I've never been someone that was scared of death or anything. So I'm still so young, but it was like, wow, like I'm scared, like every little bump, and, we ended up getting a van, but like just the rest of that tour, I was pretty down, just because I was like, this is, it's scary now, and with my kids and, and just like, it was very hard. A lot of things happened. I had a kidney stone on the tour, so I had to miss the
good
show.
God.
And we just were having bad luck here and there, everywhere. And it was pretty tough. And I haven't really even still come out of it, even though I've been home for 2 weeks almost, so, and then you, what you said is true. It's something that when you get off of it, like it's easy to fall into like a tour depression is what they call it, because yes, you spend 30 odd days being told how awesome you are and how much people appreciate your music and they love you and they, and that's not, none of those things are things I need, but they are given. So it does affect you, because you go from talking to it, but you also have that part of you that's like, I'm ready to go home, by the last 2 shows, you're like, I'm ready to be back home with my kids in my bed. But then you get here and it's just like, fuck, now I got to go back to working a real job.
Yeah.
I got to go back to normalcy. And it's weird because you are living like a dual identity, because you have your on the road identity and then you have your at home, your home life and everything's split,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, right? I mean, really, when you get down to it, Tyler, I mean, that is all of us. That's all of us. I mean, at least on the creative side, on the artistic side, there's 2 very clear, separate parts of us. We're just a little more obvious in separating that, right? We have the stage version and the real life version, and near the tween shall meet, because they don't meet at all. And the interesting thing is you mentioned going on tour and not needing any of those things, but man, when you get them, they're awesome. I mean, the adoration, the love, the attraction, right? And I'm not just talking about women or all, but all the things. I mean, the things that are offered to you, the availability to, your better desires and your worst desires. It's such an amazing experience. And to have normalcy inject itself at the end is a real strange thing. But here you are. And I guess what I want to say, and maybe just a safe way to end this today, because I know we could literally talk for hours. Is that I like the guy I'm talking to so much.
Thank you.
Not, because this is the only time I've ever talked to you, right? I mean, but the guy today is a culmination of all the things that have come before. And you may not be in a perfect space in your life, and you may be concerned about what's coming next and how, the music business might play out. And, will we have a round 3 of the pandemic? All these things, there's all this, up in the air. But I think your evidence to me that time and slowing down equals a tremendous amount of wisdom. And for 31 years old, you've lived a huge life, brother. And so many people would love to have at least had some of those experiences, and you've had them, and you're going to have more of them. So again, this isn't a question so much as it is a comment, but I definitely want to let you know that you are a massive inspiration. You're so open and forthright. Your music takes us to a special place. And I really want to thank you for being that person today.
Thank you, man. That does mean a lot. I agree. We could probably talk for another 2-3 hours just because you're super easy to talk about. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for all the opportunities and for the success the Holofront's seeing. And I'm just happy that, even though there are points where I'm not happy about things, I'm overall happy with the way that things are going, and that we are able to inspire people and, help them through whatever dark times they have or whatever, that to me is just, it encompasses things that I never even thought I wanted from music. I always wanted to play, and I always wanted to write things that people liked, but I never really never really considered the fact that it would be almost like a helping hand, and that I'm grateful that I came into, unexpected,
Yeah. Man, I'm so grateful for you, and I thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today. Did you have a good time?
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'd love to do this again.